as our guest today. So Lucy is the founder of And Sisters, which is a little bit more about And Sisters and how the company came about, how you started it.
Yeah, definitely. So, yes, I'm Lucy. I'm one of the co-founders. The other co-founder was my mother, Claire. And we founded Ancestors because we realized that despite having almost 30 years between us, that very little had changed when it came to period care and menstrual health. Menstrual health had been left behind. There's a massive lack of clinical research. There's kind of very little health-focused regulation, and on top of that, products on the market that hadn't or haven't been innovated in quite some time. Very excitingly, we recently acquired Mooncup. So together, we're now the plastic-free period pioneers who are hoping to kind of revolutionise menstrual care. Specifically within period care, mainstream products are full of plastics and chemicals like carcinogenic and endocrine disrupting glyphosates. Glyphosates, chlorine dioxide bleach, and of course things like allergenic fragrances. So at Ancestors and Mooncup, we want to kind of build a future where everyone can access menstrual care products that are good for them, for their bodies, and the planet, but also make them feel empowered.
Yeah, I mean, you're definitely doing the work that's needed. I read something the other day that it was only in 2023 that they tested period products, menstrual products, with actual blood as opposed to saline solution. So the science is so far behind, and this is why companies like yours and people like you, and I'm sure the scientists that you work with are so important. It's just a massive, massive leap forwards. And what the other thing that I'd really like to get into before we go into the main body is, um, it could seem like a bit of a disjointed workshop, right? We're at Flexa, we focus on flexible workplaces, excellent working environments, making sure that everybody feels their best self at work and is able to really find somewhere where they belong. You could, on the surface, think that that's unconnected to period products and people who menstruate. But you've had a corporate program running for a little while. I'd love you to talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, definitely. So I think kind of the corporate side and often kind of how we like to phrase it, sort of period dignity, kind of period positive workplaces are really really important. And I think often you, as you say, you might wonder kind of how they're linked, but ultimately, period positive workplaces result in improved employee well-being, reduced absences, of course, things like increased productivity, really important, enhanced company culture, and from an outsider's perspective, a better public image too. So we work with a number of fantastic businesses across all different sectors, from kind of corporate to the likes of BCG, Bearings, to retail. We work with ASOS, we work with Gymshark, and a whole host of others. So yeah, when it comes to sort of addressing this topic, there really is kind of no one size fits all. And as you say, I think it's important that it can be discussed and accessed and implemented across a number of businesses, no matter kind of what sector or space they're in.
Yeah, totally. And we'll get into some of those real practical tips of how you can do that in your workplace.
Definitely.
I always forget to say at the beginning, but anybody who has a question for us, we will leave some time at the end for questions from the chat. So there is a Q&A section. It's probably on the right-hand side. It is on my screen. So if you want to drop your questions in there, and we will get to them towards the end. So, Lucy, the first thing that I think it's important to start with is the kind of sad, negative reality that we're in at the moment. And would you be able to talk a bit about some of the biggest impacts of period stigma in the workplace when it comes to things like productivity, employee happiness, all of those things that we're trying to encourage?
Yeah, definitely. Well, I think it's important to preface that, as you say, this is a really important topic and kind of happening everywhere. And I think just to sort of put things, give you a little sort of anecdote, I guess. a member of our team told us that in previous employment that she bled through her underwear at work because she didn't have any period care and she was too nervous to ask a colleague if they had any. And the thing is, she's not alone. That the facts are really quite alarming. So just to kind of highlight a couple of those, 4 in 10 use tampons longer than advised because they felt unable to ask a colleague if they had one. 6 in 10 in the UK don't have access to period care at work, which really isn't a surprise. And a survey of 2,000 Brits revealed that 26% took leave during their period, but only 36% but 36% gave reasons such as like flu or kind of general illness, cold, stomach bug, etc. to their employers. So, not being honest and transparent about it. And the same study found that 46% would feel uncomfortable taking a tampon out of their kind of drawer or desk in front of a colleague. And we've all been there. I saw, as you say, in the comments on LinkedIn and socials, that kind of secret mission to the toilet, sliding a tampon up your sleeve, even, sitting on a toilet and opening a pad and trying to be, as quiet as possible. This is the reality. So it's so important that we do have these discussions and kind of find ways to make all workplaces, no matter what sector they're in, more period positive.
Yeah, definitely. It was amazing, actually, the response to the LinkedIn post we had yesterday around, hands up if you've ever sort of smuggled a tampon in your sleeve. And so many women came back telling all of these stories about, how embarrassed they felt, and when it's such a part of everybody's life, right? That it's just feels impossible that we're still in that situation. And it's also not just in the moment when you're having your period, right? Like there's a cycle, there's a situation. See, even in the comments, I've smuggled so many tampons in my life. But I think it's not just in that week of your period, right? It's pretty well known now, even though it does need more research, that the hormonal fluctuations across the cycle have so many different impacts on your mood, your productivity, your energy levels, right? You're not going to feel your best at all points. And maybe there is a point in your cycle, if you know that, where you feel more energetic. And so really it's like we can use these things as a strength at the same time as using it as something to help support people around. But only
absolutely,
conversation.
Yeah, no, absolutely. As you say, I think, but for a lot of what we do at Ancestors as well is about the kind of education as well. So, explaining to people about their menstrual cycle and that there are different phases, and you don't feel the same throughout the month. And as you say, to kind of understanding that and then being able to utilize different phases, within your personal life, but also within the workplace and with the workflow and the workload that you have.
Yeah, definitely. And another thing I thought was really interesting, when we kind of took this out to the community and we were getting comments and feedback from people, was a lot of people were saying like, well, this is where the benefit of remote work is, right? It means I can stay at home when I'm on my period and I don't have to hide from anybody. And I can totally see that is a valid option for people and a great option if you've got it available. But not everybody wants to work completely remotely. And, we're not going to go back to a time where it's like, you're on your period, stay at home where no one can see you. Like, we can't do that. It's not a solution. So if we're thinking about the whole spectrum of working environments, from people who are in the office 5 days a week, right the way through to people who are fully remote and everything that exists in between that, right? We're seeing a real rise in hybrid working environments where you might be in 2 or 3 days a week. What are the different things that you'd recommend or that you're seeing as best practice between the different kind of work setups?
Yeah, definitely. As you say, it's so true. No one size fits all. I've said that already, and I'll probably say it many more times. And it is really important to remember because, as with any of these things, finding the right solution for you and your team is the most important thing, and it's going to have, ultimately the most long-lasting benefit for everyone involved. So to sort of follow that, the key here is opening up the conversation with, with your company, with your team. and to basically understand what works best for everyone. Because implementing a policy might not be beneficial, to the way that different people work. So yeah, finding a good balance is key. But in terms of some suggestions, obviously there's I guess a couple of different workspaces. There's sort of corporate, which let's say is sort of more office based most of the time, and in that sort of environment, there's a couple of things you could do. Obviously, free period care in bathrooms, a really easy, obvious one. Implementing flexible working hours, or potentially. If someone, as we were saying earlier, in their cycle feels really terrible in the morning, potentially having some flexibility with kind of starting later and finishing later. Providing the right sort of workplace equipment. I use the word equipment very loosely because I wouldn't call it equipment, but things like comfortable chairs with nice back support. If people have back pain, heat packs. Sometimes, or hot water bottles. People find those really, really great for helping relieve pain. There's obviously things like a lot of people do find their environment really kind of impacts how they feel. If they get really bad headaches, potentially too hot, so having an environment where there's fresh airflow, to help people feel that they're comfortable in their work setting. And then kind of to go a little bit further, obviously there's things that you can offer, like wellness sessions that focus on physical and mental health. Things like yoga, fantastic one, yoga at lunchtime, meditation, stress management, that type of thing. For, as you say, more remote or potentially hybrid, flexible working setups. Again, you can offer free period care, but obviously it's in a slightly different format. You could offer free period care vouchers, so that kind of team members can pick them up or choose what period care works for them, and have it delivered to their homes. Again, flexible working hours. So allowing employees to potentially set a bit more of their working schedule according to how they feel. Some people love that sort of solitude of working in a cafe, sort of flexibility with their environment. Investing in kind of virtual wellness resources as well. So things like Headspace or online yoga webinars, that type of thing. Fantastic to be able to kind of communicate with your team. And then, of course, even more important, which I've discussed previously, is just having that open kind of communication and communication channels, that even if you're not face to face, that you can discuss with your team, and employees can discuss with management to understand and accommodate individuals' needs, basically.
Yeah, I think they're all really helpful tips, and I'd like to come back to the one where you're talking about equipment.
Yeah.
And I think that the thing that really stood out to me in that is, we've got providing period products as one thing, but I think that what a lot of people don't understand, and it's not necessarily their fault, right? The information is maybe not shared with them, or if you're not someone that has periods, or people around you have felt uncomfortable talking about it, or maybe you feel uncomfortable talking about it, you might not realize that the actual period, the physical act of having a period, is not the only part of that situation.
Yeah.
Like you mentioned headaches, you mentioned backache, we've talked about tiredness. We have we've got a very heavily skewed female team at Flexa, and so we talk about this a lot. We have people in the team who get such bad hormonal migraines that they feel like they physically can't stand up because it makes them so dizzy. And I think that whilst there are a lot of people who have very few symptoms from their periods, there are people who are really debilitated by it in parts of the month. And I think that that's something that maybe people don't realize because it's not spoken about. And I really loved the phrase that you used in our kind of prep notes for this session of period advocacy. So I'd love to understand, like, from your perspective of speaking about this all the time to so many people, how do you start that conversation with your teams to help people understand what a period is and how they affect women, and also to make it feel okay to ask questions or okay to be spoken about? Like, where would you go about starting that?
Yeah, great question. And to be honest, it is one that we get a lot. So I'm really glad that this has come up. I think, we call it a period advocacy champion, because that is how it should be seen, we think. And within your team, this can be a really powerful step towards removing stigma, and overall creating a more inclusive environment for everyone. The role of this kind of period advocacy champion is that they kind of foster more understanding, and sort of sort of knowledge around kind of within the team about what would work for different team members. The goal is to create a supportive network where employees that experience a whole host of different symptoms of menstruation or of other things such as menopause, and so basically they serve as the bridge between the employees and management or HR, depending how a business is set up. So I think the important thing to mention with the period advocacy champion is that this individual can be self-nominated, or they can be kind of jointly agreed within the team. But their experience or sort of understanding of menstruation and the menstrual cycle is so important to help break down barriers and open up conversations and overall promote a better understanding of menstrual health. And I think it is just important to say that in many organizations it is finding the person or people who are going to be responsible for kind of period advocacy, and one thing that we've kind of spoken to businesses and companies about, and that has worked really well, is if they're self-nominated, because then they have that passion, but also that they have that ability to be able to kind of cross from employees to management, and create that kind of inclusive, open environment to talk about these these issues, and to normalize any to normalize them, basically.
Yeah, definitely. And I'd love to, after this, I'm sure there are resources that you would recommend around like becoming a period advocacy champion. And, I think that a blocker might be, God, what am I really qualified to do this? And I think that's a blocker in a lot of things. But it'd be great if afterwards we can share some resources around how you might become a period advocacy champion in your workplace and what kind of things that might entail.
Absolutely.
Sorry.
No, I was just gonna say, absolutely. And I think the important thing is to remember that it is supposed to be inclusive, so that there's no specific person that this has to be. It's really just someone who has knowledge and or experience of menstruation, and potentially sort of issues or concerns that those who menstruate have, and feel comfortable and confident to be able to share those with the wider team of management. So absolutely, I can share some resources, of course.
Yeah, that would be amazing. We'll definitely send those around. And while we're in this topic of making it more okay to speak about periods in the workplace, this is a bit of a curveball. We hadn't spoken about this in our prep notes, but something that that I noticed people in the community talking about yesterday when we kind of took to LinkedIn and were talking about this webinar, there were a couple of people who spoke about, well, I don't want to do that. Like, I don't feel like I want to wave my tampon around my head when I walk to the bathroom. I don't feel like I want to talk to my male colleagues or female colleagues for that matter about my personal health. And the way that we responded to or I responded to those comments when they were on the post that I was sharing was, but that's fine. Like, the whole point of this is to have a choice to share or not to share and still feel supported. Is there any advice you'd give to people who would rather keep it very private? Would you say at least share with your manager, or it's completely fine to keep it to yourself? Or I don't know if you've come up against that before or have any advice.
I definitely think when it comes to kind of personal, discussions, topics, things that you don't feel comfortable sharing, we strongly advocate for everyone to only do what they feel is comfortable to them. I think you know, I would sort of twist that question on the head and say that's the reason why what we're doing is actually so important, because an individual shouldn't have to feel like they should do that. It should be a given that in workplaces there's access to period care, like there is toilet roll. We don't need to wave tampons about and hide them out their sleeves. We just need to be able to have access to products when we need to use them. And
Yeah.
I definitely think it is the state of affairs that we are in now, that not all businesses are fantastic at talking about it, or providing product, or implementing policies to support people that menstruate. But I think that we are making really big important steps.
Mm.
And I think that I mean, I've been there, I think it really depends on the kind of work environment, because I definitely think ones that are potentially more corporate, or even just thinking off the top of my head of different office setups, some offices have a big office space and there's just people at desks all over it. Some have little breakout areas, meeting rooms, small office working spaces, people working in cafes. I think in that type of environment there's definitely sort of more fluidity. But I think the real stuffiness and the real when it's I would say most black and white is in those kind of big offices, when almost when you get up and make yourself a cup of tea, it's quite obvious. So I think that's really when when it's more obvious and people feel like they need to explain themselves,
Mm.
and actually if anything, that's useful for us to know, that actually that's where we really need to be addressing these businesses, and helping them realize that it's not inclusive. There are people, and it's not just, as you say, it's not just your period per se. It's the cycle as a whole, and it's not just for a certain age either. It's into perimenopause and menopause, and all of the kind of things that come with that as well. So I don't think, if someone doesn't feel comfortable sharing, I don't think that they have to. But that's even more of a reason why there should be at a bare minimum a kind of a policy in place, which is someone that you can speak to if you want a tampon and there aren't any in the toilet, or someone you can speak to if, as you say, you're feeling really terrible and you need to go home, and not having to feel like you have to make an excuse. You've got a really bad stomach ache. It's actually you've got really bad cramp, or PMS or something. So I think we have to be understanding that not everyone is always capable of being that period advocate, but that they are still included, and they are still really important in the kind of the workforce as a whole.
Totally. And I think that's why having period products available in the bathrooms is such an amazing leveler, right? It just normalizes it.
Yeah.
You want to talk about it to the person sat next to you, you can. You don't want to. Nobody has to, no one has to be involved in that, right? You can just go. You don't have to, faff around hiding anything up your sleeves, and it's a real leveler. And I think that that's ultimately the aim here, is to normalize that people that menstruate have periods, and they're going to have them while they're at work, right? This is a normal part of life, and we can't avoid that. That normalization is so key.
Definitely reading some of those comments on LinkedIn, I could so easily imagine how it happened, how they happened, but I'm still outraged reading it. It's just seeing it in black and white. I think it writes home even more why it's so important to have these conversations, and encourage these kind of policies and provisions.
Yeah, because otherwise, if we don't talk about it, then it kind of gets brushed under the carpet. Nobody wants to be the one that puts their hand up and says it first, and then nothing changes. On that kind of theme of things changing, like when you've been working with businesses and business leaders around providing free period products in their offices, what kind of resistance and pushback do you get? And I think that'd be great to equip anybody listening to, when they're making the case to get period products in the bathrooms of their work, what kind of stuff might they come up against as a pushback, and how can they get around that?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, to be totally transparent, the main pushback is budget, and that's not necessarily because they don't have the budget. It's more because they haven't allocated it, because this is, you know, a reasonably new, unfortunately, thing that they're needing to allocate, you know, budget finances to. And I think with that can, you know, again, depending on the sector or, you know, the workplace, can mean that there's some red tape or, you know, steps that have to be taken, which can, you know, delay and sort of put on pause and push back and just generally not prioritize, you know, the you know, providing period care or, you know, implementing a kind of period positive policy or workplace. And that is changing. You know, we, as I said at the kind of the beginning, we're finding that we're now working with so many different businesses, and so many of whom, you know, it's completely new to them, and they're, you know, they're reaching out to us to understand how they can implement it, and also implement it, you know, reasonably speedily, because, you know, no one's red tape when it comes to an essential item that you have to use every month and, you know, half your workforce is using. So I think, yeah, definitely budget. But when it actually really comes down to it, I think, you know, ancestors, you know, our job is to overcome that as an obstacle by explaining to HR, and to, you know, whoever you know, the person is. Again, as I said earlier, it can be difficult to identify who that is within a business. You know, is it always HR? Is it, as I say, is it, you know, a period advocacy champion? Is it, you know, management? That can be quite hard. But I think, yeah, our job is to kind of explain to them, you know, the value in investing in, yeah, kind of these policies and these provisions to promote employee well-being. And yeah, and as I said at the beginning, you know, the benefits are so obvious. You know, even just, you know, from an employee perspective, enhanced, yeah, productivity, you know, improving the company culture, and also, you know, recruitment as well. You know, being able to say, you know, we are, you know, a period positive employer is, you know, is so important. So yeah, I think, there are sometimes obstacles, and there is, you know, sometimes a bit of pushback, but definitely once you kind of communicate that there are just so many benefits, I think, yeah, the steps are much clearer, and yeah, and as time goes on, we're definitely experiencing less and less kind of pushback or questions. If anything, you know, the tides are slightly turning, where there's more of an understanding as to, like, oh, you know, we need to have period provisions, or we need to have a you know, period care, period positive policy, so that our employees, our team, know exactly, you know, what we're offering, why it's so great.
Yeah. I also think it's a really fantastic, tangible way for a company to show their commitment to diversity, right? And diversity, equity, and inclusion. Just such a massive topic, as it should be, with all of the companies that we work for. I could not name you one company who isn't thinking about this, trying to, at least that we work with, thinking about trying to solve the problems that we have around lack of diversity, lack of equity, lack of inclusion. And I think that one of the reasons this can be such a challenging thing for HR teams to tackle is, you know, obviously the base needs to be covered. You need to make sure you're hiring without discrimination, you're retaining without discrimination, and you're really making an effort to make your culture inclusive. But then a lot of that is intangible. It's company values, it's culture, it's you know, a website where you talk about the work that you're doing on this. It's a strategy plan, right? It's data. Whereas I think that this providing period care in the workplace is such just an absolutely physical, tangible way to signal your commitment to moving this forwards. And when you put it in that kind of a frame, I think it makes it's already a no-brainer for me, but it makes it even more obvious that this is something that we should be working on and trying to do.
Yeah, it very much does feel like it is sort of the bare minimum.
Yes, yeah, definitely.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely.
So we've spoken a lot about periods. and supporting people when they are on their period in that moment of their life. And we've touched a little bit on other areas of reproductive health. So we spoke a little bit about menopause, perimenopause. Are there any other things that you would really recommend companies start to look into or implement that support the spectrum of reproductive health more broadly, all the way through a woman's life?
Yeah, definitely. And I think kind of the conversations around menstrual health then lead to conversations around things like menstrual leave, whereby you have a policy that supports team members who suffer from, potentially really bad period pain or even other menstrual symptoms. And within that policy, you provide options for things like remote work, or even sometimes, set days for paid leave, specifically for menstrual symptoms. But on top of that, there are broader conversations around other reproductive and kind of sexual well-being topics, which definitely we're seeing more of a conversation about. I think there's obviously there's lots of policies and provisions being discussed at the moment for things like abortion leave, fertility leave. Obviously, we discussed lightly earlier, sort of menopause leave, pregnancy loss leave, sexual assault leave, and these are all things that we are seeing. The conversations coming, being a little bit more overt, but definitely we're not seeing addressed anywhere near as kind of directly or overtly as we are things like kind of menstrual health or sort of menstrual wellness, and all of those are even just having as I said earlier, an individual who, whether or not it is HR, which in many cases it is, but if a lot, these startups, scale ups, these small companies don't always have direct HR contact to discuss this vast array, and also very very personal issues with. So I think finding that person is really important. But once they are sort of identified within a business, all of these topics are so important, and are affecting people without employers often knowing. But I think suggestions that I can make for companies to support employees, other than kind of policies or kind of procedures for what I just mentioned. There's some amazing platforms that you can support your team with, things like or companies like Peppy Health for fertility, Calm for Calm and Headspace, things like that. There's lots of employee benefit platforms who offer a vast array of different options for kind of hormonal and reproductive health, and they're fantastic because then employees can choose what they want and what's important for them. So I guess a couple of suggestions there.
Yeah, that makes a big impact, and again, really underpinned by being able to have these difficult conversations that can be difficult, right? To normalize
Definitely.
parts of it, and be really respectful of areas that are difficult, pregnancy loss leave, sexual assault leave,
Yeah.
which is actually the first time I'm hearing about that. Um,
Yeah.
and
It,
of course that should be a thing. And
yeah.
it just, the sensitivity around some of this, I think, can be quite intimidating, which is why it's so
Definitely.
great to have, workshops like this where you can have these open discussions, and, resources that lots of different companies can help provide on navigating these conversations.
Yeah, absolutely. I had a baby a year and a half ago, or just under a year and a half ago, and these are topics that definitely within the kind of the other mothers that I'm speaking to are really, as you say, really sensitive and very close to home, and things that, as I say, they're not necessarily discussing with their employer because it's not obvious, how they do that, who they speak to, what the kind of first steps, of that are for things like kind of miscarriage. It's a really difficult space to to approach. But as we say, it's once we start talking about menstrual health and broadly women's health, which has been, left behind, it is really important that we also acknowledge and appreciate that these things are happening in many ways, kind of behind closed doors. Offering channels and contacts for people to kind of speak about this type of thing is really helpful and really beneficial.
Yeah. And also, I think important to recognize that something like pregnancy loss leave, it might not be your direct employee
Yeah,
that is the individual that had the miscarriage, but it
yeah,
might be someone's partner.
yeah,
And that's also something that's really difficult to talk about, and we need to be respectful of. And, I think we've had a real transition in the last 5 or so years of bringing more of our full selves to work, and it's a lot of great stuff that has come
yeah,
from it. People feel more accepted, they feel that they can do better work, they're working on things that are more aligned to their values and their mission, but it also comes with some really difficult things that for so long have been purely in the realm of the personal. And I think that HR teams, people teams, leaders of all kinds have done an amazing job in navigating that change so well over the past 5 years, when it's really been a completely new door that's open to all of these different things.
yeah. No, absolutely, it has, and I agree, and I think even, it sounds silly, but even just talking about it, even being able to have this conversation now, and for followers, people on LinkedIn to be able to share their experience,
Yeah,
I guess the more doors we knock on, the more doors we get through, and therefore the more kind of overall we're speaking about these things in spaces that we need to be speaking about them in. Yeah,
totally. So just to wrap up before we dive into some of the questions in the Q&A.
yeah.
So I had a question at the end, which was, if you're a company starting out on this journey, what are the kind of 3 first things that you should be thinking about? And we've covered off number 1 pretty well, right? You should free period care
Yeah,
in the bathrooms and be just do it. It's not that expensive compared
yeah,
to what we're spending in other parts of the business, and it's a really amazing way to show that you're respecting and valuing
yeah,
employees who need that. The
yeah,
second one we've also talked about a lot, which is building this really open and inclusive culture. Maybe you're going to go away from this and look for or nominate a period advocate, or maybe you're going to start having these discussions, or even if you're an employee, just maybe you're going to carry your tampon to the bathroom without hiding it and open up a conversation, or ask someone to borrow a tampon or a pad, and start that culture yourself. We can do this from the grassroots as well as bringing it in from leadership. But I'd love for you to chat for a couple of minutes about this final one, which we haven't really spoken about, which is around doing an audit on your company or business in a I know we could probably talk about this for an hour, but short in a short time frame, what does that mean to audit your company from this perspective?
Yeah, definitely. So I think, we've mentioned lots of times that there are many, many different businesses that operate in many, many different ways, whether or not it's kind of office or hybrid. But I think when you look at this very, very simply, and going back to point one, which is, having free period care, toilet roll is provided
Mm,
for free. You wouldn't go into a toilet and expect to have to take your own toilet roll or ask for it. But obviously, with period care, you would. And I think sometimes, in businesses, it's hard to kind of see or understand why it's so important, and until there is that self-reflection, because it's like, actually, you know let's assume that 50% of our team are menstruators. How are they actually you know I guess, bringing period products in, how are they going to the toilet and, doing that whole, putting it up their sleeve or whatever,
mm,
how is this actually happening, even though you don't necessarily see anything? And I
mm.
think that that's a really weird question for a lot of companies, because it is happening, you just don't see or hear about it. And so for most, that self-reflection is, okay, it's happening, we don't see it, but that's because we haven't we haven't given any type of platform for this to be a conversation, for this type of thing to be requested, for it to be discussed, for team members to feel included, provided for. And so a few things that you could implement when you're kind of auditing yourself is, are you providing period care, but also is it easily accessible? It's not just in like a facilities cupboard. Is it easily accessible? So new team members, or team members that are, as you mentioned earlier, perhaps a bit more shy or maybe embarrassed about this type of thing. Are they there to be taken? Is it clear that that they are free? And of course, are they, of course I would say this, but is it period care that is going to be best for them and for their bodies? Using pads that contain up to 90% plastic, definitely better than nothing, but that's not really kind of supporting someone's menstrual requirements, because I won't go into all the facts. I would love to, but I won't. But I think having the best period care and having it accessible is really important. I think having things like quiet spaces. We mentioned earlier about the different stages of the cycle, but for those who get really bad headaches or migraines, or even kind of don't like really bright space, having like a slightly darker or quieter space, really a really important one for businesses to to think about if they have that. Obviously, we mentioned the equipment before, but again, temperature is such an important one. Is our office always really hot? Okay, that might not be fantastic for those who, I don't know, get feel hot flushes when they get PMS, things like that. And then again, depending on, obviously not all businesses have the ability to have this, but is there space to sort of walk around? If you've got really bad cramp, are we fostering a working environment whereby everyone is just sort of hunched at their desks? Walking around, getting blood flow is really important for across the whole cycle, but especially when you're in that kind of bleed phase. And for businesses to just think, are we enabling this? Are we enabling the people that menstruate in our business to do all of these things, which is they're such small things that you can do, but they make such a big difference. So they're my kind of so I think auditing, going through that list of working environment, what are we providing, kind of what's the work set up, and then of course do the team know that if they need something that they can come and ask us? If they perhaps would like to have a hot water bottle, is that something that we can provide? Or it's silly things, but some teas. A lot of people find that having like a hot tea or a calming, things like that, which are so easy, but I think are so quickly and easily overlooked. And so I think an audit of your workplace, a little bit of self-reflection, is a really great place to start.
And also getting opinions from your employees, making it, even if you don't want to send out a survey or single anyone out to speak to them, sending out a message or announcing in a company meeting, like, I'm researching how we deal with periods at work, and we're trying to become a more period positive workplace. Anyone who would be willing to chat to me about this, I would love to have a conversation with you. I think that can be a really good way to do it.
Definitely. And on that, we always encourage involving everyone. Absolutely, really important. Even those that don't necessarily have periods, still really important for kind of everyone's understanding of menstrual health. And then, as you say, educational workshops, or even just drop-ins to kind of as you say, have that open conversation about what could be provided, what isn't provided, what what you would like to see. Is really useful.
Definitely. Right. I'm going to click start answering and see what happens. Oh, it comes on the screen. Nice. So Emily submitted a question for us. I work in a hugely male-dominated environment, 7 women versus 48 men. Wow. How would
Yeah.
you recommend opening up the conversation in a way that engages everyone and reduces the taboo?
Great question. I think, the running theme through all of this is definitely opening up the conversation, but the million dollar question is often how do you do that? So I think it's definitely, again, and this goes to, who is the person responsible. I would definitely try to understand. Obviously, it's hard to know kind of business type and business size, but within a business, there usually is someone, often in HR, that you can speak to about things like this. And depending on how comfortable you are with almost putting yourself forward, to be potentially a period advocate, and yeah, in many ways, sort of appealing to HR, to, or whoever it is, potentially it's a line manager. If they're male, that can be difficult. But yeah, to kind of appealing to them, and laying out why having these conversations, and providing period care and having policies, ultimately is beneficial for the business. Because at the end of the day, we businesses are businesses. They have to they have to make money. They have to be, ideally, do well. And as I said, one of the biggest pushbacks we've had is budget. So I think if you can remove budget by proving the value of kind of implementing some of these things, then I'm confident that that would be a really easy conversation. But I completely understand that it is difficult, and that ratio is quite vast. But on top of that, if, again, I don't know the type of business, but if the business are looking to recruit more women, it doesn't sound necessarily very very kind of equal in terms of men and women. But if they are looking to recruit more women, then having things like period policies, and offering free period care. If someone comes to the office and they have an interview and they see free period care in the bathroom, what a fantastic introduction to a company that you are being thought of. You're being as a team member or potential team member, that you, just like toilet roll, period care is provided. So I think, yeah, that just highlighting the benefits, not necessarily just now. Obviously, the ratio is not in favor of women, but if they're looking to
To
try and
change.
encourage more women to join, and yeah, as you say, to change the status quo, then
Mm.
yeah, there's no better time than now to start. So yeah.
Yeah. And from a conversation perspective, I think, this is my anthropologist in me. I would definitely start by trying to understand where that taboo comes from. What is it that makes it feel uncomfortable to talk
Mm,
about periods in the workplace? What is it that makes the men in the office feel uncomfortable
mm,
about that? And are there any men who are closer to you, either that you know better or that maybe are in your direct team, or line manage you in some way, who you feel comfortable and kind of getting them on side? Like, I think that my instinct in a company makeup like that, where women are the minority in such an extent, would be, could we get a period advocate in here that's a man? Right? And
yeah.
really, really smash that down in terms of like, no, this is important for everybody. Like, we can't just completely ignore this. Is there a way to make this not just the responsibility of the 7 women in the office to deal with themselves, but bring other people in? And if that feels too strong, then maybe you start smaller. I always think that like one step is better than nothing. If it feels like running the whole marathon is too far. So is it that between the women, you go, okay, we know that we want to have period care in the office, and we also would really love some menstrual leave. There's a menstrual leave question I'm going to come on to in a second. We'd really love that, and we're going to campaign for that amongst ourselves as a group, and kind of start making those small steps day to day.
Yeah,
Mm.
no, that, I think that's a really great suggestion. Like switching, yeah, tilting things on their axis a bit and
Mm.
addressing, yeah, why it is. Yeah, one thing that we say so often is sitting with why things are taboo, or sitting with why things are stigmatized. Yeah, great answer.
Because it'll probably come up that the reasons that it's taboo are, when you think about them, aren't very sensible, but it's just
Mm.
so ingrained that,
And
yeah.
and 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 also there's the side which, these men more than likely have sisters, daughters, wives who, they have these conversations with at home. It's just about bringing it into a different space.
Mm.
So, I wouldn't be surprised if, if you did broach it with, as you say, a line manager, even if he is male, that he would be very open to having a conversation, and probably wonders, what you've done so far.
Mm. And figuring out what kind of a culture that you want it to be. It doesn't have to be this huge conversation that every week everyone's talking about. It can be something that is normalized as opposed to spoken about very, very widely. I think that it's sort of, figure out what the goals are as well in terms of the cultural change would probably be where I'd start. Um, so this fancy thing saying I'm done answering. Um, this next one, are things like menstrual leave benefits a good idea? I've seen them become quite divisive and create more resentment towards women in workplaces because it looks like they get additional time off. I feel like it can add to the idea that women are weak, in air quotes, because they have a menstrual cycle. This question is from Marguerite. I think this is it's a really tricky one. Lucy, thoughts?
It is a really tricky one. And I think that really when it kind of comes down to it, I hear what you're saying about the, do our women's unions kind of weak, but biologically, there are differences, and I think, we touched upon it briefly earlier in terms of your cycle across the month and harnessing, different phases of that to sort of best optimize your work. And it's kind of similar to this, in that, you know yes, menstrual leave potentially would give women, or those who menstruate, more flexibility or time off paid than men, but it really does come down to sort of, business by business, and the individual teams. And Sisters, we have a menstrual leave policy, and we haven't seen anyone abuse the system. We, obviously, by nature of what we're doing, it's something that's really important to us. But having said that, I think to the men in the business, it's, they benefit because, women feel that they, have the ability to come to work as their best self and give more. And if potentially they have, really bad PMS, or maybe another condition, forcing someone to be at work when they are not at their best, is not really beneficial for anyone. And when it really comes down to it, if someone is experiencing really bad PMS, or any type of, period pain, or any other condition, and if they are going to, if they are feeling so bad that they have to take the day off, then, as we kind of discussed at the beginning, it's more than likely that they will just take that time off regardless, and they'll give a different excuse for it.
Mm.
So I think in my experience, calling a spade is more beneficial for the overall kind of the conversation, and opening up the conversation, and moving forwards. That's my thought.
Yeah, totally. It's happening anyway. It's just happening and being called something else.
Mm.
I also think it's important here to remember that flexible working is a ginormous spectrum of different things. We don't you don't have to. And again, I think that a lot of businesses are turned off from making policy changes like this because it feels so all or nothing. We don't have to go straight out the gate and say every woman in the business, every person that menstruates in the business is allowed 5 days extra off a month or whatever. You don't have to do something crazy extreme, right? You can say, okay, so in our business, we have, for example, let's say you have a hybrid working policy where you have 3 days in the office a week, and that is standard. Everyone comes in Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. Whereas women, or people who are on their periods, are allowed to flex that rule during the week that they need to, right? Because for some women, it might not be the actual week of their bleed week that is the worst for them. It might be the week before. And in that week, if you want to work from home more days, or and if you want to take advantage of slightly different hours, or whatever it is that makes you feel comfortable in managing your own health, right? No one's going to monitor it and be like, I need proof that this was happening to you at this time. But there are other tools that we can use as leaders and people building company cultures that, apart from additional time off, like that would be amazing, and the companies that offer that massively respect them. But it doesn't have to be that or nothing. It can be a flex in some of the other policies around flexible working and remote working too. So I think there's a lot of space in that. And Margaret, your comment around maybe it perpetuating this idea that women are weaker is a really difficult one, right? And I think, I mean, God, look at the world that we live in. I don't think we're going to solve that in an individual company. It's that I feel like is the work of these kinds of conversations, and the consistent conversations that people have within the businesses to normalize that actually the fact that women are able to go through this hormonal roller coaster month on month is certainly not a weakness. If anything, the fact that they can do that and work at the same time is a pretty heroic act for some people. Gosh, the symptoms that some people have are really awful. But awesome. I'm not going to go for another question. I click done answering because we have pretty much run out of time. But thank you all so much for coming and joining us. I actually can't believe that I get to do this for work. I feel very lucky to get to have these conversations with you all every month. It's a real treat. So thank you for joining us again. And Lucy, thank you so much for coming and sharing everything that you've built and learnt with us. And we will absolutely be following up with some tips on and resources on how you can continue to build a period conscious workplace. And if we didn't get to your questions, you can find us both on the internet. We're both on LinkedIn, or you should all have my email address from the event invites. So yeah, Lucy, thank you so much for joining us. It's really been great to have you here.
No, thank you so much for inviting me to be here. I think it's such a kind of important conversation, and I'm sure we'll share stuff after. But if anyone would like to kind of get in touch to discuss anything that I've spoken about today, or anything, any questions that weren't answered, obviously feel free to reach out to me. I think kind of we'll share contact details, and also just to say, if you haven't tried Ancestors, we've just had a new packaging revamp, which is very exciting, and we have a 50% off in Boots. So do go and find your local Boots. You can email me if you want to ask questions about that. But try the best in class period care products, because I referred to that earlier. But it's really important that you're using the best products for your body and for your health, and to empower you as well.
Awesome. Thank you so much. I will run to Boots right now.
Of you. Thank you so much, everyone.
Awesome.
And Beth, thank you so much. Some really fantastic answers there as well.
My pleasure. Thank you all, and we will see you at the next one, hopefully. Bye. Bye.
Thanks, everyone.